move on to our last speaker, our final speaker of the day. Mark Gross is president and CEO of
Data Conversion Lab.
Data Conversion Labs. Thank you, Jill. It cut off at the bottom, and I was like, no, I can't. I'm confusing. I'm like, didn't want to pitch the wrong company name. I'm so sorry, Mark. Data Conversion Labs. Mark is going to be talking about how to future-proof systems, how to future-proof the technologies that we employ, both in managing content objects and our systems more broadly. So, Mark, I can see you. Do you have slides you want to draw?
Share my screen. Yeah. I think okay. Does that do it?
That does it,
good.
and we can see that.
Okay.
We're all set to go. Thanks, Mark.
Okay. Okay. Thanks a lot, Todd. So I created Data Conversion Laboratory back in 1981 because we saw the need for conversion expertise back then. And today we're sort of working doing the same thing, but across all kinds of areas of XML. And back then it was how do you get it from one microcomputer to another, and so on. Today, all fields of XML. A large part of our work is creating, certainly with NFAIS, JATS XML for our publishing customers, but for all, across the whole world, that's what, structured content, and lots of it has become the backbone of distribution, of artificial intelligence, of all kinds of things like that. And when we first started, I was told this is a 2-year business, because by then everything would be converted, there'd be nothing else left to do. And I don't think the pundits back then foresaw the need, the explosion in technology that was coming. And truly, we don't see today the explosion of technology that's still coming ahead, and the need for lots of data and tremendous amounts of it, and the need to structure and identify it, because it was just right today there's just too much for anybody to get their hands around. So where is it going? I'm just gonna hold on. What happened? Just a minute. There we go. Okay, so this quote from Simone Weil: "The future is made of the same stuff as the present," and more recently, the Bon Jovi song, "The more things change, the more things stay the same." I think what the fundamental changes, we still do things pretty much the same way as they were. We're still trying to do the same kind of things. We're ingesting information and using that to assimilate ideas. What's different today is scale and location and communications. Scale, well, it's no longer just walking through the stacks and being able to find all the information you need. I don't have the latest figures, but before COVID, scholarly publishing was increasing at the rate of 10–15% every year. So that's, that's mounting pretty quickly. And we have more information now than we ever thought anybody would ever have. And even during this COVID year, people were still writing and reading and publishing, and things have not really changed that much in a scholarly publishing area. Location, well, when I was going to school, you had to go to the stacks, or you had to travel all over the world to find documents that they were looking for. Today, a lot of things have been imaged at very high resolution. It's available at your fingertips. Information that you have to travel all over the world that existed in one copy is now totally available. And communications, the bandwidth of communications is incredible. The cost of delivering information is de minimis today, and it's instantaneous. So yes, we're doing the same things, but there's more volume, more access, and trying to ingest it all has just become really impossible for a human. You need machines to help you. So, where's it going? In order for machines to help you, machines can't just look at a page, and things that are obvious to a human are not obvious to a machine. And that's why with this vast increase of knowledge, there's a need for better structuring and better metadata. And that's led to the growth of, first it was GML, then SGML, then XML. And we always think the technology we're working with is the last one, but I don't know where, we don't know what's going to happen 5 or 10 or 20 years from now. But that's what's led to that growth, because otherwise you can't get to that information. Machines can't help you. Yes, and Google does a great job with information without tagging, and it can find things, but it works with prose, but it doesn't really work that well with scholarly and scientific communities. Working without taxonomies is very comforting. It's very nice you have to worry about it, but you end up with too many false positives, and you risk missing stuff. So it doesn't help you much if you do a search and you find 10,000 hits and you don't know if what you need is really the 9,000th of them. And it's not just these factors, but you're part of an ecosystem today. There's discovery vendors, and you've got your content, other people have their content. And if you're a publisher, you want to be found. And if you're a reader, you want to be able to, a researcher, you want to be able to find everything. And to the extent that you can provide information, each member of that ecosystem, the way that they want it, that serves your goal as a publisher. You get heard, and it serves the goals of the research community. But it's not so easy, because every discovery vendor wants that stuff in a different way, and every search system is looking for different things. So the point I'm trying to make is going back to structure. If your material is structured in a way that you can produce what everybody else needs out there, then you have a better chance to be able to get your material out and to make sure that researchers find it. And the tendency is not to do that. A lot of material out there, especially that was done more than 2 or 3, 4 years ago, is not structured very well, is not tagged very well. And yes, a platform can tell you they'll ingest everything. Don't worry about it. We'll take all those PDF files and we'll get them in there. You don't have to do any work. The reality is, if you haven't prepared it properly and you haven't put the right metadata, and then yes, it'll be loaded out there, but it won't be found. So I just want to go from here to, it's not just that you're be found, but you don't know what uses your information is going to be going to in the future. For example, I just want to give one example. Is in the whole accessibility community. This illustration, this picture illustrates it very well, I think. Just a metaphor that because you're physically not tall enough to see over the fence doesn't mean that with some accommodation, like putting a box under it, that's not enough accommodation so that you can see over the fence. And I think that's been a recognition over the years that accessibility of information, accessibility to information, is important to people with low vision and low hearing and physical impairments that prevent them from doing that. So this wasn't that feasible years ago, I mean, I suppose you always wanted to, but it wasn't really something that was feasible. But starting in the middle of the last century, machines and computers were able to start doing that, were starting to let you be able to get to information. So I think, you know, before the Kurzweil reading machine invented, and the Kurzweil reading machine is what later became the OCR machine that we're using for everything now. Before that, if something hadn't been typed up in a form that was already in text, that was in digital text, a blind person really had no access to it, because they couldn't look at a picture and have it read to them. But the Kurzweil reading machine, and that's what OCR was originally invented for, which I think was in 1974, suddenly was the ability to be able to look at a page and have it and read it to a person who was blind. And there's a tremendous video when Stevie Wonder, and that's Stevie Wonder in the picture there, a few years later, when Stevie Wonder is one of the first users of this reading machine, and just incredible feel. You could see it in the picture of somebody who would never been able to read before, and now have it read to him without needing another human to do that. It just was a tremendous opening to something. And that really, I think, started things, and just the cultural change to being able to. So and then was the section, there was the Rehabilitation Act, the Section 508 of the Rehab Act was really talking about building accessibility, but in 1998, with XML out there and other things, then that opened up the law to require, in certain cases, material to be available. And then just year by year, there were more requirements and more standards out there to allow it. Now, all the technology made it available, but it needed information to be in the right format and to be structured in order to be workable. So, like in 2005, the NIMAS standard came along, which allowed educational material to be available to the blind. But unless the material was structured and tagged correctly, it wasn't really working very well. Yes, the reading machine lets you read prose, but not tables and math and things like that. And new standards came along. WCAG was really in advance of that. It's a W3 standard for web accessibility and what needs to be out there. And EPUB had special features in it that included that kind of information to be put in there. So that by the 2016, and this is Stevie Wonder back. This is a picture when he was at the Grammys, and he won an award together with Kurzweil, and he read them in Braille, and this concept of accessibility became just everyday commonplace. And the clear mask was an interesting concept, because it has nothing to do with the digital data we're talking about, but the understanding that being able to see a person was very important. So we're still using those blue masks in New York and other places, but this is a concept that you can actually protect yourself and protect others, and still people can see your smile. But over the last few years, there's been more and more lawsuits requiring information to be out there. And just a quick story, we just recently finished a project for the Veterans Administration, where they had something like 50,000 documents online that were just PDF documents. So PDF documents can be read if they're just plain text, but once you've got tables and pictures and other things in them, they're not. So the reason the Veterans Administration had to go and have those documents converted so that they were accessible to the blind is because they were sued. There was a lawsuit by disabled veterans who felt that they didn't have access to the documents that they needed. The courts ruled with them and required that the Veterans Administration provide accommodation. So since there were PDF documents, a special tagging had to be put in to be able to do that. And that took a bit of time and a bit of effort. If those materials had been produced in a format where they were structured and ready to have that information pulled together, that would have been an automated process. If something is in XML and properly done as XML, that puts them into the right form that they could be using. And going to the future, going into the future, there's going to be more and more of this that's going to be needed in the same way. You know, I think the story from this case study is materials that were done 20 or 30 years ago, people didn't think about accessibility and having to make it available. But as you're putting material together now, that's very important to think about that, because you know, you know, the more you put in there, the more structure you put in, the more likely you're going to be able to meet future needs. Just another example is work we did for the Optical Society of America a few years ago, where they took all the materials for going back 100 years and made them into XML and made some decisions, like that they wanted all the captions captured and pictures described and math turned into full math. And they don't even think about they didn't really know what they wanted all that for, but they knew there would be future products that would need them. Well, it turned out that as soon as they put it online, they realized there was a whole market for the extensive collection of images and pictures that they had in their collections going back 100 years. These are all pictures that you know, they're very valuable in the optical world. So suddenly this became a separate product. It wasn't just the journals that were online, but all the images were now available and were available to be searched and be findable. And that also, the fact that they did that, even though they weren't thinking about that way, made all their materials accessible to the blind community also. So, and I think the future is going to be more and more of the same. And we've seen more and more laws coming along right you know, over the last few years. There's and just COVID-19 hitting 2 years ago, and schools having to go digital, and all of us having to go digital, meant that if we were ready for that and all our materials were digital, we were more prepared and were able to do that. Those schools that had their materials ready in that way were able to go right away. So, you know, it's going back to the theme of the future is made of the same time as the present. This is sort of a multi-layer view of that. The bottom layer of that, this is work that we did for the New York Public Library fairly recently, and is still in process. With taking copyright records and making them accessible and making them into a database. So the New York Public Library is a repository for copyright records going back to the beginning, I think 1890. And until recently, they were just books and just shelves, hundreds and hundreds of big volumes of books on shelves. If you wanted to look at copyright records, you had to go to the library, you had to pull a book off the shelf, and you had to leaf through it to find what you were looking for. So, so going back, I think about 10 years ago, they were all digitized. They were all scanned. All these books were scanned, and some automated OCR was done on them. Well, that was another level of accessibility of the materials. Now you didn't have to travel to the library to look at these pages. You could go online and see them. And they're OCR, so theoretically you could do some searching. But if you've looked at copyright records, those are very complex records, and unless you've got everything broken up in the right way, you really can't do much of a search. You could look for a word, but that word could be part of a name of an article, part of a description, it could be part of a publisher's name, it could be part of anything, and you end up with thousands and thousands of hits. So the next stage of development, which is what we're in the process of, is taking those and turning those into structured records. So we're taking the materials there and putting in structuring, meaning that an author's name is separated out, a publisher's name is separated out, the year of publication is separated out, and all those kind of things. So now you can do things like, I want to see all the books that were published in 1922 with this author, so that I can see if what's available is out of copyright now, for example. You could never do that before because you'd end up with too many hits. So I think you've got the multiple layers here are really showing, going through the levels of what you're available. You started with books and you had to go to the stacks. Then you were able to go any place in the world and be able to see these things. And then you're now at a level where you have a database that you can work from and be able to search for specific things. And that's, and to the extent that we've got this over here, this is now available for not just databases. You can also do all kinds of analytics on that information. You can see how many books were published by what publisher year by year, or whatever other analytics might be of interest. Also, these are accessible. A blind person could easily go through these and do a search for specific things and be able to find information need and have it read to him. So by having all this kind of structure put in, we have that availability, and we don't know what this will be used later on. We're now going, artificial intelligence is taking over in many areas. By having information at these kind of levels, this becomes input to artificial intelligence. In the AI world, they say nothing starts till you have data. Well, that's the kind of data you need to be able to do things. Until you've pulled them together and digitized them and structured them, you don't really have that. So what's the future of content? Well, it's all about those ecosystems, all those places where the material is going to be used. No one system is being used. It's being used in many different places. So this approach of structured information, having open standards that, when you take things from one place to another, they'll work in the same way, transparency of information, and ultimately accessibility, not just accessibility in a technical term we were using it, of access to the disabled, but also accessibility worldwide to be able to go through all these materials. And the future is the same stuff as the past. Thank you. Todd, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And so we're going to switch up the schedule just a little bit. I've been chatting with Jill in the background here. And we're going to do the conversation engagement and discussion session now, if that's okay, Mark.
Okay.
Rather than taking a break for half an hour while people maybe have a virtual lunch. I think we'd make sense to take advantage of the fact that everyone's here and do that now, and maybe end the session a little earlier today. So please feel free, if you have questions, type them into the Q&A functionality or the chat functionality for Mark. We'll also kind of, after a couple minutes, draw in some of the other speakers into the conversation as well.
One quick note, Todd, before we get too far into it, I am having to manually allow talking from audiences, from audience members. So just bear with me as I go through this process. There are 30 of you, but the other alternative would be for everyone to raise their hands.
Yeah, why don't I was just going to suggest that rather than doing that with everyone, if people would like, they can raise their hands or mention something in the chat, and we can unmute individually rather than unmuting everyone at the same time.
I will make sure that's the way it works. Thank you.
Great. So, Mark, one of the things that you talked about was the issue, like the challenges around structured data and the potential there for supporting machine reading, artificial intelligence applications. Um, I'm wondering that as you talk to the people that you work with, um, these these new services, they don't come free, right? They have some costs. And I'm wondering, how do you explain to a client the value of investing in these additional services to future-proof their content, right? This might be something that is a year to 5 down the road, but they have to sign the check today, right? um, you have to pay for these developments, and
Sure.
the application might not be today. It might be something that you might need 3, 4, 5 years ago from now. Um, Having gone through this process several times, as you know, we're going to scan everything. Oh, we're going to scan everything again, and we're going to scan it at high resolution, or we're going to, we're going to code it, and then we're going to recode it in the next system. How do you have those? What goes into some of those conversations?
Well, obviously the easiest conversation with those who either already have those things going on and are spending large amounts of money trying to deal with them with older technology, or have sold themselves. It's very hard. I agree, Todd. I mean, I don't think I have a good answer for that, because if I did, I'd have a million more clients out there, right? It's like the Optical Society, I think, is a very good example. The sponsor of that project just felt very strongly that information was changing very quickly, and to take shortcuts would mean that they would not have access to information in the future. So the sponsor was the person who really pushed ahead and went along and sold it internally into the organization. I don't think I could have done that, but I think the cases were that that once information was available, there would be new products out there, and they'd be able to sell them. And I think that's what happened over there. In other places, it's another kind of sponsor that they're working with. I think taking it out of the academic realm is the U.S. Patent Office, where we're involved in converting all their incoming materials, that are the patent filings and other correspondence, into XML, so that they can go onto so their patent examiners can work with them. So for 20 years, they really were working with it coming in as images, which meant that they were paperless, but they had to leaf through everything. So that wasn't really very, very helpful, but the costs were too high to really convert everything. That goes back to your how do you convince it? Of course, it's just the traditional costs of doing this were $1, $2, $3 a page. It just wasn't workable with an organization that's getting 5 million pages a month coming in. The breakthroughs were improved OCR and improved AI and improved techniques that were able to reduce the costs, and also the understanding, and this is, I think, a breakthrough which may be of value in other places. Usually in the publishing world, in the academic public, we think of, we got to get it 100% perfect. Otherwise, it's not, it doesn't look right on the page. Well, the patent office understood that, gee, if I can get 99% perfect at 1/20th the cost, that was still worthwhile because I don't need 100%. I needed to get to the point where I'm able to do the things I need to do and still be able to get to the original document in case I get. So that was the breakthrough. So artificial intelligence allowed us to create a technique where we clean up documents better, so OCR was better, so that what came out of it is better, and created a good document, and with the understanding that 99% was going to be good enough, so you didn't have to proofread everything. And then the patent examiner would whatever he saw something didn't look right, they would look back at the original page. So this allowed him to do all the analytics and all those other things. So I think it needs a business case in almost every example.
Yeah.
So I don't have a good answer for that one. I'd be a lot richer if I was.
Well, I think that I think your point is a really good one, that oftentimes in our community we strive for perfection, and perfection comes with a lot of costs, and 99% is really good, and for most use cases
Right.
is
Not all use
sufficient.
cases.
Right.
Right.
I want to make sure that the physicians who are, sticking me with needles, I want them to make sure it's 100%. But
Absolutely. In the standards community, if you get the digit off, somebody might die or a building might collapse. That needs to be 100% accurate.
right.
But it's not most cases.
Well, and having a canonical record that you can refer back to, that is perfect.
Yeah, that's pretty important. Yeah.
Yeah. To what extent is there a kind of signal that says, and I guess maybe this should go as kind of information literacy. This might not be 100% accurate, character by character. You might notice it, but a kind of caveat somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's a leap for most people to accept that. So I think, yeah, it needs a warning, it needs a cultural change, it needs all those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easier in electronic formats almost then, because people sort of expect a little bit of that. But look about like books to the blind. I mean, that would be if the intent of NEMIS was that everything had to be proofread and 100% accurate, it just would be economically not feasible to provide those books. So if they're, so people are used to that, to being not perfect but really very close. So
Sure.
I think there's that where on the scale do you need to be able to make progress and still make it economically feasible, have that return on investment, to use the business term, makes sense.
Oh yeah, and especially if for those on the call, if you've ever tried to experience a text to speech or some of the other assistive technologies, and the various ways in which they completely collapse, say trying to read a PDF where it will go from column A to column B, but it'll just go straight across.
That's exactly the point, and that's what had to be done on those Veterans Administration's documents. You had to build reading order to be proper. So
Mm-hmm.
PDF documents are a great thing, and there is a way to put that information in, but they normally don't have it. So the AI that you apply has to be able to make those kind of decisions, or you have to fix them by hand.
Oh yeah, and I'm just thinking, like, for those people who have had that experience, um, there is completely inaccessible. There is what was possible 10 years ago and what is possible now. You go from nothing to 40% to 85 or 90%, that's a significant jump
Right.
in the how these tools have
Right.
improved in
And
recent
it's
years.
going to get better. I mean, AI and computer vision techniques to read a page have been huge leaps, even research we've done in the last year. So it's getting better, and it will get to that. Uh, I'm not sure perfect will be there, but very close to it.
No one's even people aren't perfect.
Well, well, even books in a third and fourth edition aren't always perfect. So
Yes. Um, where do you see some of this technology headed forward? Will we get to a place where machine learning will be able to overlay some of the semantic information in documents in production such that there will always have to be human intervention, but do you see some of that technology being deployed, and is that
yeah, I think
likely?
it is already, and I think it'll be more and more. I mean, I think what deals with the factual pieces in a document, the factual information, I think machines are going to are getting much better and will get much better. So, I mean, today, in indexing medical documents, I mean, taxonomies are used to figure out, what kind of cancer it is and what the different names for it are and what are the categories up and down. And I think with machine learning, some of those taxonomies can be produced more and more automatically. So I think factual things like that, I think there's going to be tremendous advances. I wouldn't even say in 20 years. I think this is happening very quickly. When it comes to things like identifying this is cynicism or this is, I don't know. I'm not sure that's going to happen that quickly. I think we still need humans to understand what humans are trying to express. I mean, I know if you've seen there's computer generated text that's producing whole articles and synopses of things, and they're getting better, but they're not quite the same, but they're good enough. So, but they don't necessarily capture the non-literal things that are going on in a novel. I mean, so I think there's going to be differences over there. But
Yeah,
we're getting better.
absolutely. Yeah,
We
I
don't know. I mean, 10 years ago, I guess 10 years ago, nobody thought a computer would be the chess world champion, right? But today, there's no human that can really beat a machine consistently.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I remember it was a couple years ago, maybe 6, 7 years ago now. Um, the first I'd heard of machine writing of structured data, and it was coming out of the sport, in the sports world.
yeah,
And a friend of mine, and yeah, God, this was maybe like 7, 8 years ago. It was pretty basic. Um, but a friend of mine is a sports columnist, and I said, the first thing a machine can do is replace what you do. I guess it shows how much intelligence needs to go into sports writing, and
right.
we were
Well,
joking about it. He
yeah,
took
but
it.
it's all factually based information. So to put that together, you can see where a machine is going to go with that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's going to write the next great novel.
Well, that's certainly true. I mean, humans have problems with humor. Um, in terms of the conversion process, in terms of the underlying information technology, um, actually, question came in, and I'm gonna head in that direction first, um, because this is kind of interesting in terms of metadata and inconsistencies in metadata. You talked about discovery. Um, could you speak in some ways about how we might overcome problems in metadata inconsistencies and how that affects delivery platforms and discovery platforms.
Right. Well, yeah, I think that's an issue for a lot of organizations. I mean, you know what? I mean, what we've actually done for a couple of clients now is uh, uh, we sort of have them build a super collection of metadata that not everybody needs. Everybody needs different pieces of it. So. And everybody wants it in a different format. So we get the information in a particular format, which is really a superset, and then we're finding we're taking subsets of that and sending to different discovery vendors as they want them. So I think that solves the issue, at least for this publisher, of everyone wants things in a different way. The preliminary problem of those is collecting the right metadata in the first place. And to some extent, I think we're more and more is being collected automatically. I'm not sure it's done as well as it needs to be. I don't think people understand the importance of the metadata in making and being found. So I think up front it does need more attention. And I think automated metadata generation will get better and better over time, but it's going to need attention from the publishers that are working with their own material. The big issue is that metadata sort of depends on the particular material they're working with and subject matter expertise to really understand what's there. So again, I don't think there's a silver bullet on the front end of making sure. I think you need experts to really at least help generate that. But the mechanics of it, I think there needs a realization that you really need to do the best job you can, not just put it out there and hope that people are going to get it. You really need to make sure that everybody gets what they need in the way that they want it for their systems. So does it make sense? I feel like I'm rambling at that one.
No, it makes perfect sense. These are the sort of things that then the people participating in the call certainly are dealing with on a regular basis. Do you think that there's going to be, and have you seen publishers or content creators involving themselves in the process of improving that, iterating that machine learning, that automatic creation of metadata? Are they reaching out to you and going like, how can we help make this better because authors aren't providing it, or we can't afford to do it by hand?
So we're doing some of that, but not so much for the publishers. I mean, some of the delivery platforms and I mean, the people who are generating large amounts, secondary publishers are producing large amounts of information. Those are the people who are really dealing with this at a large scale. So, for example, in the financial world, people are collecting financial documents. They're dealing with very large numbers of documents, annual reports and quarterly reports, and it's coming in from all over the world. So, how do you get the right information out of there? So that's a process where we've been working on automating that, because there's just too much and it has to be done by hand. So there's a financial incentive to make it happen. But I haven't seen that so much in the scholarly community so far, except in some places. I mean, we did work for Scopus a few years ago, so for Elsevier, where right, Scopus is a bibliographic database with millions and millions of records. But going back more than 20 lately they've been getting the information in the form they needed, but going back more than 20 years, before 2000, the information had just come in untagged. Because nobody thought you'd really need all that tagging, right? So we did a project with them where we went back and tagged another 20 years worth of content. I don't remember how many hundred, I think it was 100 million records that had to be tagged so that the authors were separated from public, all that kind of thing. And that was an totally automated project. So it couldn't be done manually because it was just going to be too expensive and take too long. So that's one example of publishing really went out because it was very important to be able to get that record to go out further back and get those authors to get the credit that they need to get for their publishing. So I think that's one example of a publisher who did go to that level. But And I think there are probably, I mean, the other publishers we have been working with who have been working on building better taxonomies for their own material so they can produce better automated metadata as they go along.
Yeah. Okay, so it's, at least from that perspective, as content providers are kind of walking in and saying, here is our vocabulary or taxonomy, ontology, match it, use this as a tool to match against.
Right, that's a lot of what they're trying to do over there. I mean,
Yeah.
that's part of it. I mean, the earlier part is to convert their content into XML or something like that, so they can actually work with that level and make it work across the board.
Sure. Do you see, in the same sort of way that we've done backfile digitization, we've done the kind of backfile, conversion into XML and things along those lines. Has there been a similar kind of, okay, we now have the XML, we're going to now semantically enrich our backfiles? Is that something?
Yeah, I am seeing that. I mean, now that
Yeah.
you've got the XML, first of all, XML has to constantly be upgraded to keep up with the latest standards. So you've got some of that going on. But once you've got it structured, it's much easier. I mean, we took a whole backfile collection last year to bring it up to the latest version of JATS, and it was a totally automated lights out operation. Once you've got all that, and you do that all the time when you re-platform from one platform to another. But once you've got that structured, the semantic tagging is an add-on that can be done fairly easily. I mean, you certainly are, you're at the 80% point of being there rather than being at 0.
Yeah.
And really I think that's going to continue to be done because as AI gets better and it can do those kind of things, it makes sense to go back and look at what you've got and see, can I do it now? Can I do it now? It's like almost every year, sort of, it's worthwhile to relook at what you have and see if maybe now it's possible to meet the goals that you couldn't meet 5 years ago.
Sure. We got another question in. I want to see if we can bring Robert to the floor because I have the way he wrote it, I'm not quite entirely clear what he meant. So Robert, can we unmute you and
I'm working on it right now.
I'm not quite sure what he meant by lack of clarity
So
in content.
Then it's probably not a very good, clear question. So I was on a panel, I guess last year, and somebody was doing a presentation on accessibility and standards, and we had parallel talks, but it was just the lack of clarity in the content of the standard actually proved to be a challenge to them making it accessible. And I was just wondering, Mark, if you've seen that. I mean, standards are a very specific content type, and sometimes I think they're kind of like text rules, and they're really challenging to understand, even to perhaps an engineer trying to follow them.
Right. Yeah. So if a human isn't going to understand it, it's going to be tough to do. What accessibility standards really deal with, and they deal with more and more, but it's once you've got a table, how do you traverse a table? That's really, in the standard community and the scientific, that's really a big issue. So it's not always clear how a human would traverse a table. You sort of, after with some experience, you look at it and you figure it out. But really, I mean, right now, I think the reading machines and stuff like that really work in a very mechanical way. So if you've got a table and you've tagged it properly and all the cells are in the right places and the spanning is there in the right ways, then the reading machine will traverse it properly. It'll traverse it, it's probably a good experience to try one of these, but it'll let you go across, read column by column. When you get a column you're interested in, it'll let you read down, and so it lets you do those kind of things. But if a table is so convoluted that you really can't make heads or tails of it, it's not gonna. That's still a limitation of what these are going to be doing. It's not going to try to ingest the material and try to make sense of it. It's really just ingesting the material and reading it back to you. And tables are hard because tables aren't really. Tables are just a graphic form of presenting information. So you could do almost anything you want in these things. So, it's going to continue to be a challenge for a while, I think. But the mechanics of it can do, but it can't make sense of something that's hard to make sense of.
Well, I guess that leads to another piece of the question. I mean, if something is challenging for an expert to understand, what is a machine going to do with that? And you had already mentioned taxonomies and ontologies and maybe deeper tagging as things get better. I feel like, to me, those seem like requirements at this point for something to be machine readable or actionable, or artificial intelligence able to do something with the content. Would you agree with that?
I would agree, but it's not going to be perfect. I mean, it was sort of like made these. I mean, not to get too philosophical, we've made huge leaps over the last decade or two, and even in, year by year and almost month by month, it's hard to keep up with the literature. But we've gotten to this point because we're looking at information at orders of magnitude more than we've ever thought possible, right? So and we're using machines to help us make sense of it, but machines are still not where the human brain is. And the machines are good at collecting a lot of information, but making sense of it, machines are not at that level over here. So with mechanical information, they can now play chess for a variety of reasons, because it's because of the nature of chess. But they're not at a point where they can make sense of things that we don't really understand. And I don't know. I think that'll take a while still, regardless of what Ray Kurzweil says in his book right now, that it will be obsolete in 10 or 15 years. I think it's going to take a while before machines can do that. So there's still the human need over there. Maybe not for sports writers, but
Yeah.
but certainly in the scientific world.
Right. Yeah. I think Kurzweil is a little ambitious in his thinking about where machines will be.
Well, in his 1997 book, he had a chart of where it's going to be for the next 50 years. And he was really spot on for 20 years. But now I think it's starting to stretch a little bit. So.
Speaking of stretching, there was another question in here, which is a bit of a stretch, but I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this. In terms of non-traditional content, and even kind of extending beyond not just text, the question talks about augmented reality, really, and accessibility for augmented reality. But I'm wondering, are we going to get to a place where accessibility is machine vision becomes decent enough to be robust, to explain, to create the kind of alt text that we have in print or transcriptions, so that you're like, this is over to the left is a tree and the window is on your right.
Yeah, I don't know. This is sort of like goes out of my expertise. I mean, I sort of look at it. I've been watching it and I've been reading on it. I mean, you look at a Google search and what they do. I mean, they'll find you pictures of cats, and they'll find, and there's, I know there's a project out there to be able to figure out vegetables in a store, and it's based on lots of machine learning and pictures of string beans and stuff. So I think when you're dealing with specific things, it's doable. I mean, you can recognize a person, and a person facial feature. It's gotten pretty good. It's gotten scary good. But to identify what's in a picture, just say it. This is what's here, and this is what it means. I don't know. That's really, I think it's taking a little bit out of my realm of. I'm sure there's guys back there in Google that can't tell you what they do, that are worrying about this a lot and won't tell you. But it seems feasible. But we're past my level on this one.
Well, yeah. I think there's certainly extensions of some of the things we've been talking about that do sort of enter the realm of science fiction, and the point of which, we can see the problem, right? But an extension of accessibility for print, you take that to a television show, you take it to augmented reality.
Right. This is I've supposed spent my life in that text print world, tables and all those things. This is a whole new dimension that's been added, and it's pretty incredible. And actually, just the transcription technology has gotten so good. I mean, you watch TV shows now and you get immediate transcription down there, and a lot of it is pretty, especially for sports, it's pretty good. When it comes to foreign television stuff, it's not so good. So.
Yeah, I mean, we take advantage at NISO of the automatic transcription of events like this, our annual conference. Although the live transcription did run into some problems, so it is far from perfect. Well, Mark, this has been a fantastic conversation with you. Thank you so much. I do appreciate the time you spent joining us today. And Data Conversion Labs is a great company. Thank you.
Okay, well, enjoyed being here, and thank you for asking me. And it's a great organization, so it's wonderful to be affiliated with it.
Fantastic, thank you. So we'll draw today's session to a close a little early. As I mentioned, we kind of skipped over lunch. I'm sure many of you are kind of grumbling away, like it's time for lunch.
I'll get off now.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So thank you all. I want to end on a couple notes. The first is a thank you to all of the speakers who've joined us today, Mark, Dan, and Chris. In addition, all of the speakers yesterday. This has been, as I said at the outset this morning, I have personally learned a lot from this program. I hope you all have as well. A couple things. You will be presented with a short survey when you close out your Zoom interface. Please do take a few moments and let us know how we did, what you thought of the program. I'm interested, and for those of you who can take a moment, if you could raise your hand using the raise hand feature and just say really quickly if you would like to hear more. As John said during the panel conversation yesterday, we could be talking about this topic and issue for hours. There is a lot going on here. There is a lot of issues and challenges, very practical things that organizations have to deal with. If you would be interested in hearing more, and this is not this is not signing you up, but if you would like to hear more about this topic, just raise your hand and let me know and let us know really quickly if this is something you'd be interested in more NISO programming on in the future. We might reach out to you as a registrant of this event and just kind of get more thoughts from you of like what specifically you might want to hear, what topics specifically you might want to hear. I see a handful of people have put their hands up, so I appreciate that. Because I think there is a lot to dig into here. With accessibility, with machine interoperability, with the nuts and bolts of getting products and services out the door. Chris's discussion of standards, you know, standardization of APIs, how do we manage and how do we create systems that are functional in this new environment of cloud services and cloud interactions. I think there's certainly a lot to dig into here. This has been a really fantastic conversation. I'm so glad that you all have been able to join us today. We will, as I said, be sending out the recording. That'll be sent out hopefully tomorrow, along with all of the presentation slides posted to this event. So be on the lookout for that. We'll send you an email with instructions on how to get access to all of that. So with that, we will draw our two-day session to a close. Want to remind everyone that our annual members meeting is a week from tomorrow on the 25th. That's free and open to the community. All of you are please welcome to join us. And we look forward to seeing you all at a future NISO event. Thanks so much and have a very pleasant afternoon.